Welcome to RAM, Renew the African Mindset. It's actually a platform where we create awareness on topical issues prevalent within the African community. It's actually a platform where we share ideas. It's a platform for collaboration of agencies or individuals on projects in furtherance of um, helping to build up Nigeria or other nations. Today, we're going to focus on Nigeria. And why Nigeria? I would read a bit out of what's actually in the papers. In the British Guardian newspaper, and I quote, sexual violence is endemic in Africa's most populous country, Nigeria. Data on the number of reported cases is very limited, but on a national survey on violence against children in Nigeria, conducted in 2014, found that 1 in 4 women had experienced sexual violence in childhood, with approximately 70% reporting more than one incident. Only 5% sought help, and 3.5% received services. Reported crimes come up against systematic failings of Nigeria's criminal justice system, which rarely prosecutes cases. Police have been criticized for their response to recent rape or murder cases. Evidence at the scene remained uncollected for days after the crime, which obviously has undermined chances of successful prosecution. Few days ago, exactly on Wednesday the 10th, June 2020, the Minister of Women Affairs in Nigeria, Mrs. Pauline Talon, she was actually at the Federal Executive Council meeting, where she stated that there has been a rise in the increase, a rise in the rape cases, and she said we need to speak up right now, and then for the judiciary to take prompt dispensation of justice, and for the police to ensure proper investigation instead of brushing things under the carpet. So, on the backdrop of that, that's why we're talking here today. How do we tackle sexual violence? And one we're going to focus on is rape, because there are several dimensions to sexual violence. A lot of people will say it's nothing to do with me, but then again, we pray that we're not victims of sexual violence, particularly rape. Why is there so much of this incident in Nigeria? The Minister for Women Affairs said it's due to the lockdown. Yes, the lockdown, it's a global thing. But why the sudden increase? There was a time in South Africa where toddlers were being raped, and people said, oh, the reason why that was the case was because of the fact that some people thought that by raping toddlers will cure them of HIV. Of course, that was a taboo. There is nothing like that. That's due to ignorance. So, what's the problem in Nigeria? Does it mean that we are not raising up our children properly? Does it mean that prosecutions are not being dealt with properly? What's going on? We need to find out. So, we're going to use UK, which is an advanced nation. Let's look a bit into the legal system here. Compare it with what's going on in Nigeria and see where there are shortcomings from the legal system in Nigeria. What else could be done? So today we have some police officers with us, and we also have representatives of NGOs, and of course we have legal representatives to actually shed some light into this very, very important topic. This is a terrible endemic which needs to be stemmed as soon as possible. Now, the first person I would invite to actually speak is somebody who is a barrister from the Inner Temple, which is one of the four inns of Court of London in England. He's a solicitor and barrister of the Supreme Court of Nigeria. He's very experienced, and he has dual experience with practice both in the UK and Nigeria, combining alternative dispute resolution with criminal law. In the UK, in the last 2 decades, he has been involved in several cases of rape and historical sexual offenses where the victims have been women and children. Is very qualified and experienced in cross-examination of vulnerable witnesses in sexual offenses, eminently qualified to discuss elements of the offense of rape in whatever context, including marital rape and sentencing regime in England and Wales. Welcome, Jide Lanlane.
And thank you very much for
Can you hear
that
us, Jide?
very, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, I said thank you very much for that very elaborate introduction. Thank you. I think the starting point, in my view, is when you discuss this very emotive topic,
Right,
is for us to define what we're talking about, as
right,
in from the eyes of the law.
right.
Because if we don't understand the context that we're dealing with from the legal point of view, then it becomes difficult when the conversation proceeds.
Right.
For that reason, I thought the best way for me to present the position, what in the United Kingdom is regarded as rape, and the context of it. And just to set the ball rolling, I will seek to define rape in other contexts as it's defined in Nigeria.
Yes.
And then those who have to deal with the issues in Nigeria can then deal with it. But it's very important that we understand how rape is defined in the United Kingdom and in Nigeria. If you permit me, I will just briefly set out what that is, unless you have any questions you wanted to ask specifically.
Okay, maybe I should just signpost you. We
Yes.
know that there are several dimensions of sexual violence. Could you define for us what is rape
Right. So far
under
as
the
in the
UK law?
United Kingdom, sorry, I
Under
missed
the
that.
UK law.
Yes. Well, rape is a statutory offense which is committed by a man upon a woman or another man. And it consists of non-consensual vaginal, anal, or oral intercourse.
Right.
So that's very important.
Right.
Because sometimes people think it's just vaginal. It can be oral, it can be anal. So the definition, according to Section 1 of the 2003 Sexual Offences Act, is that a person commits an offense if A, he intentionally penetrates the vagina, anus, or mouth of another person with its penis. B, when he does it without the consent when he does the penetration, and he did not reasonably believe that the person was consenting. So the Act continues to say, whether a belief is reasonable is to be determined having regard to all the circumstances, including what steps the person took to ascertain from the other person if they were consenting. For example, if somebody was asleep, did you wake them up to find out this is what I'm about to do? If they're drunk, for example, which, as you know, in the United Kingdom, that happens frequently. People go out to clubs or pubs, they have a drink. Either the woman or the man, as the case may be drunk, and the person proceeds to have sexual intercourse with them. So any penetration is sufficient. The man does not need to ejaculate before it's considered rape. As long as the penetration has occurred, then that will amount to rape. Before 1991 in this country, not to go through the historical background, but before 1991 in this country, in the United Kingdom, it was not accepted that a rape could happen in the context of a marriage.
Right.
But subsequently, by 2004, the law which I have just quoted, which is the 2003 Act, came into force. And so rape can occur in the context of marriage. And the fact that people are married does not mean there is an implied consent to rape. The fact that you're in a relationship of any sort with the person does not mean that the rape cannot occur. So that is the general context. There are three very quickly jurisdictions in Nigeria which I will refer to, which also defines rape. So if you take account of the fact that Nigeria used to be a British colony, and predominantly the laws of Nigeria was the laws that were in place in the United Kingdom or Britain at the time.
Right.
So you will find that although Britain has moved on, eventually moved on, and as I said, from about 1991, it seems in Nigeria the definition of rape does not include rape, that rape can occur within the context of a marriage. So as long as the person is married, it seems that there is that implied consent to be imputed in those circumstances. So as you would also be aware, and I'm sure some of the panelists would know, that Nigeria has the what used to be the Northern Protectorate and the Southern Protectorate, which was then amalgamated. But the laws still remained in somewhat what they were during the amalgamation. So for example, other part of Nigeria describes in the section 357 says, any person who has unlawful carnal knowledge of a woman or girl without her consent or with her consent, if the consent is obtained by force or by means of threat or intimidation of any kind, or by fear of harm, or by means of false or fraudulent representation as to the nature of the act, or in the case of a married woman, by impersonating her husband, is guilty of an offense called rape. So it's not assuming that the husband can rape in those circumstances. It's saying, even if you impersonate the husband, you have committed rape. In the northern part, the penal code says, section 2811, a man is said to commit rape who has sexual intercourse with a woman in any of the following circumstances: A, against her will; B, without her consent; C, with her consent when her consent was obtained by putting her in fear of death or of hurt; D, with her consent when the man knows that he is not her husband and that her consent is given because she believes that he is another man to whom she was lawfully married, or with or without her consent when she's under the age of 14 years of age or of unsound mind. So you can see that that variation, which may have been influenced by Islamic law, applies there. Then you've got the definition that Lagos State laws.
Mr. Lalaine, Jude, can I stop you right there?
Yes.
I will hand that over to Bolahon to actually deal with.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, let's, because I know that you practice in both countries. But then again, we don't want to be too bogged down with the legality of that, you know. But the thing is, my next question to you is that what's the custodial sentence for a convicted rapist in the UK?
Well, it depends in the circumstances.
Right.
There are category 1 offenses, category 2, category 3. Now, depending on the harm, particularly physical and psychological harm that the person suffers. But very briefly, you could, for the topmost, more serious of the offense, attract a sentence between 13 to 19 years imprisonment.
Right.
At the lowest end, it could be between 4 to 7 years imprisonment. those will apply in cases where, if it were date rape, in inverted commas, people where there was no violence, there was no other aggravating factors. So those are the kind of, and then after that, depending on what sentence that you attract, you would then be placed on what is known as a sex offenders register. So, and that would depend on what sentence you attract, so that any sentence beyond, for example, if you attracted a sentence beyond 30 months imprisonment, then you're on the sexual register for an indefinite period. Anything between 6 months to 30 months imprisonment, you're on the register for 10 years. Any prison sentence for a term less than 6 months, or if the person was admitted on the hospital order, if they were mentally ill, then they will be on the register for 7 years. And any person cautioned at the police station, they would attract a sentence, they will be on the register for 2 years. Then it depends on whatever other context, those who, but on average, some people may end up being on the register for about 5 years after they've been convicted, a sentence. What that register then means is that wherever you live during those periods of time, the police must have your address, because it does assist if somebody who's been convicted of a very serious sexual violence, the police know where this person lives, and each time they have to report. They will give them a time period where they need to be signing at the police station so that their whereabouts, because the more serious offenders, particularly those who offend against children, if they, for example, have accommodation close to a school, then the police will have to act on that and make sure that they're moved away. But it's all to ensure that there's some level or degree of control over that person, because of the conviction and the serious nature of the offense that they've committed.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Do you have an idea how long it takes to obtain a conviction from the courts, right from the time that the matter is reported?
From the point when it's reported, it's difficult to say specifically, but you can, just as for argument's sake, it may take, depending on the nature of the particular incident, it may take the police 3 months, 6 months to investigate.
Right.
But from the point when the person is then charged, then there's a strict timetable for them to be charged to court. And you may find that most cases will probably take place within a year of the person being arrested, the person being charged to court. There may be various reasons for delays, which may include the person themselves, maybe if they're seeking to investigate the person, the alleged victim, and the case is moved for various reasons. But on average, most cases will probably be tried within a period of 12 months from the time that the court process starts. Sometimes it goes on for a bit longer, but again, each case has its own different unique sets of circumstances. But I think on average, most likely within 12 months. There's been cases where there's been lots of delays because either the defendant is not available for trial, or they're serving a different sentence on another case. And sometimes there could be delays for up to 2 years for the trial to take place. But most of the delay sometimes depends on how long it takes the police to identify the suspects. Because in some cases, if it's a stranger rape, they may need to go through scientific evidence, DNA, fingerprinting, telephone evidence, which may take months, and in some cases, years before the evidence is compiled. There's been cases, for example, where somebody committed a rape and it took about 12 years before the person was discovered. So all of that means that when the trial itself starts, there's been a long delay, and witnesses may not be available, as the case may be. But on average, if everything goes according to plan, you should have a trial within 12 months.
Okay, thank you so much for that. One last
Yes.
question I have for you.
Yes.
If it's the
Yes.
case involves a high-profile individual, would that person actually find a way of plea bargaining? Are they above the law in the UK?
In the
Yes or no?
UK,
Are they
you may
above?
find that no one, well, nobody's above the law. However, that in some cases, I mean, the good example is the famous case of Jimmy Savile, who committed all manner of sexual violence and offenses in his lifetime, and he was never prosecuted.
Yeah.
And the reason was because he was an influential person, and he had contacts within the police and within the establishment.
Right.
So those, I would suggest, may be the exceptions. But ordinarily, it doesn't matter who you are, you will be prosecuted. But then I say that, you also know, of course, Prince Andrew has not been accused of anything except that he's a witness. But you also know that because of his position, he's not gone over to the United States to assist in the.
But of course,
but that's what I mean. That although you say, ordinarily speaking, nobody's above the law.
Above the law.
Social media is rife with all manner of individuals being accused of things. Although I do not support that people should be tried in the social media. That's not fair. They must be tried in a court of law where the evidence is tested. But the answer to your question is nobody. Ordinarily is above the law.
No, yes. Nobody. Good.
Yes.
So I'm moving over to Nigeria quickly because we want to make sure that we finish right on time, around about 6:30. The next person I'm going to invite to actually shed some light on the legal system in Nigeria is an individual who was the pioneer rule of law advisor to the current Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. That's Professor Yemi Osinbajo, SAN. He served as the Senior Special Assistant to the Governor of Lagos State on legal matters, where he was instrumental in setting up the Lagos Domestic and Sexual Violence Response Team. And he also set up a Public Interest Law Partnership and Community Service Unit, to mention a few. He worked as an investigator and trial lawyer for over 8 years at the International Criminal Court in The Hague, which is in the Netherlands, where he investigated some of the world's most dangerous international crime suspects. He is currently the Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice of Ogun State in Nigeria. Welcome, Bolahan Adeniran. Bolahan, can you hear me?
Yes, and thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Yeah. Now, you heard what Jide said. The definition of sexual violence, or, well, we know it's got different dimensions. The definition of rape, as it quoted. Would you agree with that under the Nigerian law or not? Yes or no?
Well, I mean, because Nigeria is a federal system with many states, and because criminal law is a state issue, right, the laws have changed in some states. So what he has said is true for most of Nigeria, right, but in certain states, the law has changed. In my state, for example, in Ogun State, right, I can read out the definition of rape for you. And this is from the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Law of 2017. A person commits the offense of rape if he or she, so both a man and a woman can commit rape, intentionally penetrate the vagina, anus, or mouth of another person with any other part of his or her body or anything else. So you can use a pencil, you can use your penis, rape can be committed with any instrument. Right. The other person does not consent to the penetration. And then, of course, it has a number of scenarios where consent is discussed.
Right.
So the law has changed, and I know the law has also changed in Lagos State, but in the majority of the states in Nigeria, the law is as Mr. Lanley
I think you are
said.
freezing just a little bit. Is that not slightly confusing then? If you have different laws,
Sorry, I missed you there.
is that
Did
not
you ask
slightly
any question?
confusing? Is that not slightly confusing if we have different laws then? Because once we have different interpretation of the law, then it would actually have an impact on custodial sentences.
Yeah, you're right. That's why the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, that's why it came into force.
Right.
It came into force to try and harmonize the laws across Nigeria in relation to sexual and gender-based violence.
Right.
A number of states have adopted it, including Ogun State, as I've just read out.
Right.
But the majority of states still haven't. And that's an ongoing advocacy issue.
Right. And I was reading through, there was a case of a baby being raped in the northern parts of Nigeria, Kano, and also in some other areas, well, in Lagos State, as a matter of fact, where it involved an oil executive. He was actually handed 15 years. Meanwhile, in some other states, it's less than that. In the northern part, the penal code says is life imprisonment. How come we have different custodial sentences all over the place? Which means, they wouldn't serve as deterrent.
So the country is, has over the years been trying to develop sentencing guidelines.
Right.
And some states have developed them, other states are still working on them. Some states have focused on specific types of crimes. For example, in corruption cases, some have gone beyond to cover all sorts of crimes.
Yes.
Generally, like in Ogun State, the maximum punishment is life imprisonment. In Lagos State, it's the same. But a judge has the discretion to give a lower sentence depending on the facts of the case or the circumstances of the offense.
Yeah. Because one would actually think that he's sending out the wrong message to people then. Now, Jude talked about the sex offenders register, and I could even remember somebody also saying that there is a sex offenders register in Nigeria. Does it exist, or is this just all cosmetic?
Well, I believe I think one has been set up at federal level. Lagos State has had one for several years now. Ogun State, we are about to operationalize ours. We, on June 9th, just on Tuesday, we set up our own Violence Against Persons Management Committee, which is a multi-stakeholder private-public body that is supposed to coordinate the response to the incidents and
Right.
then manage the implementation of the law to ensure that it's effectively implemented. And of
Right.
course, one of the provisions there that needs to be implemented is the establishment of the sex offenders register.
So, how effective is this register?
Okay, in Ogun State, we don't have it yet. I said we're just about to operationalize it. I can't really speak
No, but what
for the
about the one
federal
for
one yet.
Lagos? Because I remember you also worked in Lagos as well as a prosecutor. So would you have an idea whether is that effective?
Well, I would, and there are a number of people here that I see who are still working on it in Lagos, and I would like them to respond because they are more
Okay.
current
All
about
right.
it than I am.
Okay. All right.
I think it's something they can speak about.
All right. Okay then. Why is it that I mean, it was actually stated in the Guardian here that prosecutors take too long for cases to be heard in court? Why is that the case? Do you know?
There are many reasons for it. And I think a lot of people are to blame. And that is why the concept of the response team is now coming into play, where a number of the challenges that we face in responding to sexual violence can be tackled as a whole. I'll give you an example. You have cases where the victim is still undergoing medical treatment for many months after the incident. and
Right.
therefore is not able to provide any form of testimony, even though someone is arrested
Mhm.
because of an initial identification,
Yes.
but there isn't that complete or concluded investigation that you can take to court.
Right.
And that can be a problem at times. You also have the issue of our congested criminal justice system. And
Mm.
so even when cases do get to court,
Mm.
it takes months and months of adjournments before they can be concluded. Now we're
Right.
starting to see many, or I would say at least some states, start to prioritize those cases. For example, in Lagos,
Yeah.
there's a court that's been dedicated to dealing with issues of sexual violence. And because of that, they're able to go through things a bit more quickly.
Yeah.
You're also starting to see chief judges who tell the courts or the judges in the high court to prioritize cases of sexual violence. Because
Right.
what we do find is that the longer the case takes in court, and
Right.
then the greater or longer the window one gives to the perpetrator, the alleged perpetrator, to
Right.
influence the family of the victim to
Right.
perhaps drop those charges.
See. Now, you mentioned that family of the victims to drop the charges. How are cases which involve high profile personalities handled?
So um, ideally, everyone is supposed to be treated the same way before the law.
Mm-hmm.
You can imagine it depends on the status of that high profile individual.
Right.
The attorneys general of
Right.
states
Yeah.
are the ones who take the final decision on such charges.
Right.
And so, if the attorney general is firm and the
Right.
attorney general is independent,
Right.
he's able to continue with the case despite the pressure coming from outside. But that said, there are other ways that they try to use to delay cases. So, for example, persuading the victim not to testify.
Yeah.
And if a victim is unwilling to go forward,
Mm-hmm.
unless the evidence outside the victim's statement is robust enough,
Mm-hmm.
it might be problematic to continue with such case.
Isn't it also down to our culture as well that people just keep quiet, the culture of silence, and at the same time, the stigma attached to it that people will just sort of like wave it?
Well, I mean, what I say to that is, I always say that if the system has not incentivized or encouraged people who have in the past complained about such cases, if the
Mhm.
system has not given them enough encouragement, then they will always remain silent. So it is for the system to reform itself
Mhm.
and try to give people the confidence that when they do report, they'll be treated well, they'll be treated fairly, and things will move along.
And also protected, because I think that's very important as well, because like I read from the newspaper article, it's that even investigation are tampered with. I'm going to probe this further with the police officers we have here. Is Dolakwa Badmo still with us? Because I cannot okay, she's still there. Okay, the next person I'm going to talk that is going to help us shed some light on this is actually a police officer. She has worked in several departments within the Nigeria Police Force, a member of the Lagos State Domestic and Sexual Violence Response Team, which is a team that was set up by the Lagos State government to combat gender-based violence. She was instrumental in creating the Family Support Unit Department, which was solely created to investigate and ensure proper prosecution of sexual offenders. They also monitor and ensure the welfare of survivors. She has been at the forefront of advocating against domestic and sexual violence. She's actually a responder to domestic and sexual violence occurrences. She has worked assiduously to ensure justice for survivors through proper prosecution and conviction of perpetrators. She visits schools to counsel and sensitize students about the protection and speaking out against sexual violence. Please welcome CSP Dolakbo Badmos. Welcome, Dolakbo.
Good evening and good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Now, we heard what both lawyers have said. How if do you even have this national register at all? The National Offenders Register?
Well, like I would say, the law of violence against person,
Yeah.
which we call VAPP law, was uh, passed by the National Assembly in 2014,
Right.
and every state is expected to domesticate these in their states.
Right.
I'm aware of Lagos State that have taken this very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also aware of Ekiti State. If you've been following me, after that incident of rape, both in Ibadan and Edo State,
Right.
I felt so concerned. Then I started calling on all the first ladies so that from their angle we can get this implemented. And it was discovered that in some states, this gender-based violence law have not been domesticated.
Right.
So after those meetings, as a responder, I spoke with the first lady from the angle of impressing it on their husbands that they should make something happen, they should let it work.
Yeah.
So the first meeting I had was with Her Excellency Mrs. Fayemi. She told me that's the first lady of Ekiti, and she told me about what they've done seriously in Ekiti. They have structures on
Yeah.
ground,
Right.
and then from there, I think the second day, the Nigerian First Lady, Mrs. Aisha Buhari, called an emergency meeting with them. And from there, they were able to establish what we call Nigerian states against Nigerian state first ladies against gender-based violence. So
Right.
what this does to us is now they were able to impress on their husband. And 2 days ago, you are aware that the Governors Forum have they've actually declared a state of emergency
Yeah.
against gender-based violence. I'm so happy, I'm so elated about that, because what that is going to do for us is that, like you're asking me now, do we have a national register? I think a national register will culminate from states, because if they have the report of Lagos, if Lagos have their own register, if Ekiti have their own register, Edo have, they will bring all of that together to have a national register. So if there are states that have not domesticated this and it has not started working with them, it might not be easy to have a national register. So I think they are trying to start from somewhere now. I am not aware of any national register as of now. But as soon as I want to believe that,
Yeah.
as soon as all the states get serious about this, then
Yeah.
it will have a central register that
Yeah.
can be, given to everyone, anyone that needs it all over the world.
Yeah. You see, from what you've said to me, it's like every state wants to do this, wants to do that. Is anybody even monitoring this at all? Because people are just setting up different NGOs, and how effective are these NGOs? Because from the article I read, I will read it again. It says a publicly accessible online register of people prosecuted for violence since 2015. So, what this is saying is that it had been in existence since 2015, which allows public bodies and the police authorities to conduct background checks and identify repeat offenders. But from what you're just saying to me, it's like it probably never existed, and it was actually published to say that.
Well, I I stand not to be quoted. Let me say like that. I'm just telling you from my own opinion. But I, for one, am not aware of one operating.
Okay.
But for the fact that I'm not aware does not mean it doesn't exist. But as a responder of so many years, I'm not aware. I've told you of where I am aware of. And I have also said, and in fighting GBV, we don't. It's not about NGOs at all or alone. It's about coordination, well coordinated, unit
Yeah.
or committee that can actually come for this. I can tell you about Lagos State, where we have the domestic and sexual violence response team. You
Right.
understand? It's a whole lot. We talk about the police involvement, we talk about the medical team, we talk about the market people, we talk about the religious leaders, we talk about even school, even school children. So it's not about whether there is this NGO there or there. Yes, the NGOs, they can come on board if they will or they wish. But first of all, what we're talking about is, do governments have a structure in place? I mean, state governments, do they have structures in place? Like while I was speaking with Her Excellency Mrs. Fayemi, what they had there is like a committee. Do you understand? You know, the committee consists of the women affairs, you know, the office of the first lady herself, you know, the police and every other. But when you come to Lagos, they call it domestic and sexual violence response team. So whichever way any state want to name it or label it, what we are after is that there should be a unit, well coordinated unit, that as soon as an offense occurs, then we know, okay, is going to the police. The police will do the investigation. They are going to the medical team. The medical team does there. Is going to the Ministry of Justice, where DPP will also get involved, and every other thing. When we have that structure, well-structured committee in place or unit, then we will see enough convictions and prevention.
So what you're basically saying, I'll just summarize, is that you have to bring in all different stakeholders into it, and then there has to be a proper structure. So obviously, right now there is no proper structure. So obviously, then you have these perpetrators, doing whatever they like. So
No, without actually downgrading what some states have put in place, we can't actually say there is no structure, because you can't say this that Lagos we agree with you. You can't say this and Ekiti we agree with you. Do you understand what I'm saying? But basically, that's the reason why a state of emergency has been declared. So what that we do is that they will be able, all over Nigeria, states will be able to coordinate and ensure proper thing is being done. So I won't go with your line of thought that structures are not in place.
Okay, now moving on, Sharpish. During investigation, do you even find out what goes on inside the mind of this rapist who commits such heinous crimes? During your investigation, do you find out why? Because why the endemic? We know that there
Of
is a lockdown, but according to what the Minister for Women Affairs said, that it's tripled. Why is that the case?
Well, I want to say that the latest cases have not been opportune to be part of the investigators, but the ones that have investigated over the years,
Right.
when they are brought forward, even for the fact that you cannot read their mind, what they keep telling you is that it is devil. They will always blame it on the devil. But the question I ask them is that, of course, this on a lighter mood. Why won't the devil push you to go and stay on Third Mainland Bridge, and then you let a car read you off? Why won't the devil push you and go and jump into river like on Third Mainland Bridge? I won't subscribe to the school of thought or for your own explanation that the devil caused it. Basically, I think it's about indiscipline. Um, when people see that they do things and then there is no serious repercussion,
Right.
the trend tends to continue. So I will say that we need to firm up. We have the laws. The laws are actually there. The laws are there, but we need to implement. And it starts by getting conviction. And we can't get conviction if there are no coordinated, sex of rape is different from they slap me and then you come with a swollen face. Sexual offenses, especially that of rape of defilement, takes a technical approach. Do you understand? It starts from getting the victim to talk. It starts from then getting the medical personnel to ascertain that it actually happened. Do you understand? So when you have those coordinated units, when you have them together, then as a police officer, when I get the report, I know I can't determine whether there is rape, you understand, or not. Then I send immediately to the medical team, who is already on standby for me. And then the medical team confirms that, okay, this is what we have seen. Investigator, there is evidence to prove that actually this has happened. So based on circumstantial evidences I have, and the medical report, I will be able to nail the two together and then send to court, who will already have, evidence that is overwhelming. Do you
Right.
understand? To
Yeah.
prove a case, then we don't need to waste long time, and then conviction will be easy. And I tell you, I want also for us to know that when we get conviction, we should publicize it on our TV stations, on our radio stations. So whenever anyone sees and said, "Oh, this man is going to spend the rest of his life behind bars," then he sends shiver down the spine of another person and say, "Oh, I'm not going to perpetrate this." So if we work like that, I think things are going to get very better.
Okay. What type of support do you provide the victims with when they are threatened by the perpetrators? Because at times it does happen like that, or if it involves a high profile individual in the society. What kind of support does the police provide?
Well, at our own end, and as a police officer, a trained responder, number one is one thing you do to a survivor is to give a psychological support.
Right.
You start telling the person, "Oh, calm down. This isn't your fault." Because the first thing that a survivor starts thinking about is that, "Oh, I caused this to myself. It's my mistake. Why did I go to his house? Why did I pass through that place? Why did I move out 8 p.m. in the night?" So the number one thing you're going to do is the psychological support to let the person know that, "Oh, you are fine." Number two is to let you know that this, don't condemn, don't feel condemned. You are as well as good as I am sitting here right with you. So when you do that, then the medical support, which we also call for immediately, is also necessary. And then another thing is, if you view the survivor as someone that needs shelter, because if a father is defiling the daughter or raping his own daughter, you don't want that daughter to go back to the custody of that man. So you can also give a support of shelter through those coordinated units. Because if we have the coordinated unit, then we have shelter already with the government where they can be kept. So those are the ones I can actually remember
That
right.
kind of support. But what about the investigation? I mean, how long does it take from the time somebody comes to the police station to actually make a report?
Well, it's not something that should take too long time, because immediately that case is being reported to you, action starts.
Right.
And then when action starts, I up to getting the perpetrator. You understand? Or you need to focus and put that. If the perpetrator is readily available, then
Right.
there is no time wasting. And if the perpetrator is still on the run, then you start for hunting. But
Right.
it's not something I can actually do investigation of gender-based violence, especially that of rape or defilement, under 3 days, depending on when the medical report comes back.
Okay. So when you say under 3 days, then you pass it on to the prosecution, the Department of
You
Public.
charge the case to court.
Yeah.
You charge it to court.
Okay, you charge it to court. Thank you very much for that. So people will still have questions because I can see questions coming in through the chat box for you. So this is the period where we have someone who has actually uh, been affected by this type of crime that we're talking about. And I would say this is a huge step for an African to actually come out in the open without um, going behind the camera to say, I don't want my face to be shown. And obviously, the person is trying to send a message out that, just like what the Minister for Women Affairs said, that it's high time we began to actually speak out. So, when we speak out in the open, we nail the perpetrators, they're given stiff sentences to serve as deterrent for others who actually have some sort of disposition to commit such crime. So this individual is actually a veteran Nigerian actress, journalist, television and radio presenter, and was the first pioneer editor of African Women magazine in the 1970s. Uh, women's magazine for Africans in the diaspora. She's an educationist, a counselor, and a life coach. Her acting debut was in December 1966 in the premiere of Wole Soyinka's The Lion and the Jewel. Whilst in England, she appeared at both the Dublin and Edinburgh International Festivals, and in 1973 she was in Peter Nichol's The National Health and played a lead role in Yemi Ajibade's Parcel Post at the Royal Court Theatre, to mention a few. On her return to Nigeria in 1976, she featured in several notable Nigerian films, including Tinsel, the award-winning Nigerian soap opera. She also featured in other notable movies such as Oloibiri, Dazzling Mirage, and Madam President. She's a fellow of the Society of the Nigerian Theatre Arts and the fellow of the University of the Third Age. She received a national award of Officer of the Order of the Niger from Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, the former president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and she will forever be remembered for the classic television series in 1979 by Laolu Oguniyi's Winds Against My Soul. The person that's going to share the personal experience with us is no other than Mrs. Taiwo Ajayi Lycett, OON. Welcome, Mrs. Lycett.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege, it's an honor to be here. This is a very major, humongous topic, and I've been fascinated by the contribution so far, and I'm impressed by a lot of the work that's been done, but I don't feel it here. I was a victim, and fascinated to hear all the work that's been done that was never absolutely at all used during my ordeal. It then brings me to the fact that if we had to address this problem of rape and its scourge, we cannot just look at its symptoms, otherwise we end up only treating, it seems, with all I've heard, effects with effects. And what do I mean by this? Sexual discipline or purity is perhaps one of the greatest blessings any child could receive. Are we adults and youths pure in heart? I'm not playing any religious cards here, but considering Nigeria is a religious-centric, maniacal country, it ought to be a hunger to see God, serve God, and ensure his will by doing the greatest good for the greatest number of his people. And from what I see about the structure being put on the ground, I can't see much seriousness in it. There's no great priority put on this. With all due respect, it's all about people who are at the top, and they're not pulling their weight. I don't see them pulling their weight. No, am I referring to the chasteness of sexual purity, but I have in mind instead forms of it, virtues such as the result of hungering for truth, for justice, for goodness, for striving towards a wholesome spirituality, the result of thirsting for decency, which we are lacking in this country. So before we talk about rape, we want to find out what's at the bottom of all this, what's causing all this. It's not just the lockdown. Rape's been going on for ages. I was raped in 2006, 6th June 2006. That's, the mark of the, whatever it is, 666. So in order to control rape, we need to inculcate in our people, particularly the young, a great dose of discipline. As the inspector, the policeman, Dolapo said, discipline is important. And in a country where religion is everything, we tend to blame everything on the devil. Let's face it, with the nature of man, we would never be able to entirely eliminate rape. But to curb it, we need to urgently deal with lust. I hope we have psychologists here and sociologists here. First of all, our people's sexuality is warped, it's being warped. Tragically, we're seriously in trouble with pornography. Secondly, we seem to have ignored or abandoned the virtue of modesty at the dodgy altar of modernity, fashion, spurious materialism, and mindless syndrome of carry me. This business of the mind. Mine is bigger than yours, ostentatiousness. To get here to the ideal which our society once had is to hold the key to the solution, because the rape pandemic is occasioned by our unease, a disease caused by the debris of created polluted images from mostly pornography that fill the heart and choke to death our natural bent towards happiness and orderliness, which is the loss of innocence. Our children have lost innocence. Africa is losing her culture, and it is affecting our youth in particular, as evidenced by the epidemic of rape. It is because we have abandoned our culture. When I was being attacked, I was 65, and a young man was defiling me. And I kept telling them, do you know, are you doing this to your mother? The culture is so completely gone that they can do this to anybody. I mean, when we had a culture, when we had a society, you would look after an old woman. You wouldn't start assaulting an old woman. Only an animal would do that. What's happened that we got to that stage where we're raising animals as children? Also, we are waking sexual urge before it is time. I believe that promiscuous, premarital sex is not part of our culture. It was taboo in those days. Now we have rejected that culture. And so youths now have indiscriminate sex, and nobody even bats an eyelid. The day they don't see meat, somebody said to eat, someone said, they will wrongly steal meat from the pot. In Arrow of God, Chinua Achebe said, unless the penis dies young, it will surely eat beaded bread. So we don't have any more social structures, cultural, traditional structures for our children. We don't have the law that offers sanctions, real steady sanctions towards offense. So where are we? We're living in anarchy. The lawyers can enlighten me about this, and the sociologists, please. So that's a bit about what has happened to me. And I hope that I am here because young girls are being damaged. Some of them are committing suicide because they feel, as Ms. Dolapo said, they've done something wrong. There's no way in which you won't blame yourself. You think, what have I done wrong? But my idea is to give them courage, to indicate to them that you have to train your mind. You have to put your heart. You have to put this behind you and get hold of your mind, master your mind, so that you can see what has happened, not blame yourself, not be a victim, a survivor, yes, but you're not a victim. The real victims, to me, are the men who are perpetrating this. And they need help, somebody ought to help them. And of course, look after our young girls, to tell them that they must heal, and they must heal with their mind, and they must take control of their mind, and they must not let anybody own them, own their head. That's it.
Mrs. Lice, I have some questions for you.
Yeah.
Were the perpetrators prosecuted?
Nope. That's why I said I've listened to the theory of all this being set up and all that, and this is what they'll do. When it was reported, the police came, and the first thing, the young lady who led the investigation said to me, "You're living in this big house by yourself," as though it was my fault that I live in my house. But of course, I was set up by my staff, so that's something else. But she seemed to think, well, you deserve this if just you alone can live in this. That's another thing about the death of innocence and the death of purity in our society, where envy rules and where you can diss somebody in that sort of condition. And having reported everything to them, they expected me to start paying them, to give them money for petrol, to do the investigation, to run around And now I'm here battered. Iron rod has been battered against my one of my legs, and I was lucky, as the doctor said, not to have broken bones, because at that age, no bone would heal that quickly or easily. And there was no support from the police. I never saw them again. No, living in that place for somebody to say, well, you need protection or whatever. Not one. I had to depend on friends who organized to start looking after me. I never heard from the police thereafter. They stole my passport, stole various things. I had to send a member of my staff to them so I could get a police report so I can get my passports back. They stole my dead husband's passports, and all that. It was a very, very sad account that the police gave of themselves. I'm not very proud of that. I hope they've improved. And I was hoping with this that I would hear that a lot more has been done, especially since we have children of 6 months, 2 months, 6 years being raped, and nobody, and a lot of them are fathers and mothers, and they're not up in arms and getting something done, but sitting around in committees and passing papers, shuffling papers around. That is not urgent enough for them to pick something up. That's the sort of thing I would like to lend myself to see, that there is some urgency is applied to protecting vulnerable people, women, and to address, and psychologists to look at these men who feel that they can be, the only way they can express their masculinity is by dominating and hurting women. Then we have a lot of sick people running around in our society, young and old. And that includes so-called big men who are effectively pedophiles, who are marrying young girls. That is rape. Who I don't know how their minds work when they feel that you can get a rush doing that. I know the nature of man. When they see a woman and they got to have that woman. But when you have a lot of people, even in the legislature, who are effectively pedophiles, how are you going to get an answer to this rape? This is a wonderful discussion we're having about to get solutions, not just to be theorizing, solutions, actions. And we ain't getting, from what I'm seeing, we're not getting it because nobody is anxious to do anything about it because it's not their daughters. It's not their daughter that's affected. Everything is so personal in Nigeria. If it hasn't happened to you, then you don't accept that it's happening. And so there is no urgency for you to do anything. And if that's leadership, God help us.
Mrs. Lysett, obviously you're a very, very strong woman, because
yes,
somebody else, they would have either committed suicide or ended up in a mental health institution. But thank God you're here with us and sharing the story with us. So because of the fact that they did not proceed with the prosecution, you just kept quiet about it? Can you hear me, Mrs. Lysett?
Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah.
The fact that they did not proceed.
Yeah, with the investigation. Obviously, maybe they were trying to put you off, or they didn't believe you. Because, like I said to you, I'll be asking some questions, more or less playing the devil's advocate here. They could probably look at you and say, well, after all, she's an actress. Maybe she was lying. And this is one of the things that they shouldn't be telling.
No, I think that
survivors. Yeah, because this is what kills people's spirit, and they don't proceed further to go through the investigation. So would you think they didn't take you serious?
No, they believed it because they saw me. I was trussed up like a chicken, my arms behind my back and taped up. They saw the damage.
Right.
But this is what I'm saying. This is a supposedly a rich woman, well-to-do, and she's an actor, and they don't have to do and they don't have to rush anything, and I don't have any power over them. I'm not a politician, and all that. So they're not going to do anything. They didn't think that they were looking for money. If they were to come to me or go to do something, I was to put money down. Well, I am ideologically completely opposed to that kind of working. I'd like my country to have a structure that operates justice and fairness and equity in our society. And I'm not going to subscribe to because you're rich and you're famous, you do something. I think due process is important. And as long as we're not operating due process, it's going to be the highest bidder that gets anything, or famous. Anybody can make a noise. I don't make any noise. I just like things to work properly. I think that they believed it. It's just that they thought, well, serves you right. When you see, it's a human condition. When you see somebody up there and they're down, the tendency, if people have not got this purity I was talking about, which is looking for something that's greater than themselves, which is looking for, all the things we're talking about is to make Nigeria greater, really. It's not about self. Why am I? Because it happens to many people. What's so special about it happening to me? If it can happen to anybody, why can't it happen to me? But what is important is that we do something so that it doesn't happen to anybody, because nobody deserves that sort of assault and disrespect, really, effectively. And then to add insult to injury, you're supposed to bow your head around and to be ashamed that something happened to you, and to lose your reputation and lose your prestige and lose your dignity because somebody attacked you, and the people who attacked you, they're walking about, and nobody thinks that there's something wrong with that. That's what I'm talking about. So I don't have to pay somebody or badger somebody to do their work, which they're not doing.
Right.
And that is sad. It's a very sad state of being in our country. We don't have to, if you have a job of work, I don't have to pressure you to do it, because there is something called, a system. You have a vocation and you must have an evocation. Just to have a vocation is not enough. You must be committed and determined. If you are a lawyer, you want law and justice for everybody, regardless of who they are. And you go and you pursue that. Well, when I don't see evocation in somebody's vocation, I am a little bit saddened for my country. So they don't have to like my face or what I do, but they must like injustice being perpetrated on anybody.
One final question for you, Mrs. Lysett. So you never received any form of counseling at all?
No.
No. Okay. Sorry.
After the police came and spoke to me, I went to my personal doctor, who did suggest, when he looked at me and all that, he looked at me and said, well, they'll do all the usual things they have to do, STD, HIV test, STD test and everything, and then treat my injuries. They affected my blood pressure because they stopped my circulation. It's the grace of God that I'm like that, and a lot of work. This is what I'm saying. You must use your mind to look after the body, rather than be worrying about what anybody is thinking. Anyway, my doctor said to me, would I need counseling? I was 65 years old. I don't need counseling. I thought I knew the profile of the people who did this to me. And I knew that I don't have to have counseling to understand that this was not going to affect my life in any way, except that to know more and more that Yoruba say that that life is not easy, and yes, and you must stumble and get up and go. And that's all it taught me. You stumble, you find out the other side of life, and you know, that puts you in other people's shoes.
Right.
And that has to be, if you learn that, that has to be a blessing to me. That has to be an added blessing, really, gift to my life.
Thank you very much.
So
for
yeah, thank you.
We wish you well. Honestly, you are
Thank you.
such a brave woman. I'd like to quickly bring in a geriatrician, Osiogbu. If you're there, I just have one question for you, Dr. Osiogbu, because I can see her here. Dr. Osiogbu, are you there?
Yes, for me.
Okay, fine. Welcome. You've heard what Mrs. Lyset said. As a geriatrician who takes care of older adults, what would you be concerned about?
You know, first I must remember I said to you after the last meeting that I'm a big fan of Mrs. Lyset, and I didn't get to say it before. Now even a bigger fan for the courage she has shown in coping with the ordeal that she had to go through at such an age. She's definitely used the wealth of experience of being over 60, inner strength to have been able to deal with the ordeal. I am also sure that she had a lot of support from friends, even though the state didn't give her the needed support, but she did have support of friends to have been able to go through this. And spirituality. I know that she brought this up at the last meeting, and she's been able to use all of these elements in being able to cope and overcome that ordeal. It really shouldn't happen to anyone who are still at that age. So I'm really sorry that you had to go through that, Mrs. Lyset. But thank God you're here, you're a stronger person, you're able to share and hopefully give a voice to other people to be able to come out and feel that they are not the victims, but like you have said, the perpetrators of this bastardly act being the victims.
Thank you very much for that. I just want to quickly bring in Dr. Olufemi Olugbile. He was the former PAMSEC for Lagos State Ministry of Health and the Chief Medical Director for Lagos State University Teaching Hospital. Dr. Olugbile is actually a psychiatrist, consultant psychiatrist. Dr. Olugbile.
It's frozen. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Right. There you are.
Yes.
What goes on inside the mind of someone who will deliberately go and rape somebody? Not only that, a 65-year-old woman, old enough to be his mother.
You know, part of what happens in sexual engagement is power. Okay, and clearly you are talking about the context you are describing for the unfortunate incident described by Taiwo is one of a violent, it's in the context of a violent incident. Presumably her house was robbed and the sex was just part of it. And it's actually one of the most common scenarios we get in rape in Nigeria, that where some hoodlums come into a person's house, they ransack property. They also commit sex. Not when you look at it psychologically, it's not really the sex, it's the power that they are pursuing there. The satisfaction or the pleasure bit is psychologically minimal. Okay, but the power, the sense of overpowering another human being is immense, and apparently that's the one that gives them an ego trip in that situation. But there are different contexts in which rape takes place. That issue of power is one of them. But in the context of a violent incident is another one.
there was an incident that happened, and then there's also a socialized form of sexual aggression that is very, very common. I think about 2 ago in a school in Victoria Island. It was all over the press that during the celebration of, it had become a traditional thing in that particular school, during the celebration of the end of the year, when a batch were going out to the world, the boys suddenly, while they were having a party and celebrating the school, as part of that ritual, the boys started running after the girls and raping them. And people from outside the school actually had to step in, and it became a big scandal and going to the press. And boys didn't think that they were doing anything wrong because all people before them, people in the previous generation for them, had actually done similar things. And the school was even aware that that kind of thing happened, and it could have been headed off at different levels. So it seemed to be socially accepted. And in some circles, it has become part of the definition of being a boy, being a male person, or being macho, that you suppress the feeling. And it's not just, psychologically, but physically. And so that's how the rape thing becomes an expression of it. Rape can be an expression of mental illness. Pedophiles, the socialized pedophiles who are facilitated into it by a misinterpretation of certain religious tenets, but the actual pedophiles who only get sexual gratification from, having sex with babies and underage persons. Then it can be a technical thing. You can actually have consensual sex, but the person is not old enough to give consent. So that is a technical, and all of those things have different but connected psychological issues attached to them. There's a male dominance, there's a sense of power, there's a sense of I can do it and get away with it. I can do it because it is there. Even the issue of date rape is not really as innocent as somebody takes another person out and takes his girlfriend out, and then she gets drunk, and then he takes her to he has sex with her, not thinking that she would mind because she's not under the influence of the alcohol. Sometimes people actually induce that inability to give informed consent by, there's a culture within some cultural social nexus, which is actually very common in Lagos, and other men will put some substances, some hypnotic substances in the drinks of their partners, and that will affect their behavior, and then they'd have sex with them. It could even happen right there in the disco hall, or in the Garden of Fate, or somewhere, or in the car, and whatever. So all of those things, the common things to them are that I can get away with it. Then it connotes power, it connotes influence. There's not a lot that's going to happen to me. I'm likely to get away with it. Structures of society are such that they cannot pursue me, even if I get into trouble, in quotes, to acknowledge the efforts of people like SCSP, the lack of Badmus, people are actually doing something. Lagos State is doing something, but we are only at the very beginning of mounting an effective response. Even where you are in that context, where you can actually get into trouble and all of that, you probably will still get off for all manner of reasons. Maybe the evidence is not sufficient, blah, blah, blah. Okay, maybe the reporting is late, maybe, for whatever reason, okay? And then to really capital, and that's why the register thing comes up. I think the discussion of the register has been mistaken so far. The point of the register is not to share information with foreign agencies, or it's not just, it is that if you go and you want to teach in a school, in a children's school, or you move from Lagos to Abia State, okay, and you want to hold a job where you come into contact with as part of the routine background check, people should be able to look in a computer and tell, or even if you want to move in a particular neighborhood, okay, the information about your background, including whether you have a history of sexual predation, should be available to those people so that they can tell whether it's a reasonable, they're running a risk in having you in their neighborhood or having you teach their children. That's the point of, that's actually a major strength of the register, and we're falling down on it because, yeah, people are doing this in Lagos and in Ekiti, and all of that is to be encouraged. But we really need to systematize this and know the value of what we are about for it to have a telling effect in, and then that it may be the beginning of an effective deterrence, an effective effort to contain the problem. Of course, there's an abuse potential too. I need to put that in, that, you know, and it's imagine, well, it's not so prominent here, but it's imagined in some parts of the world. There's the issue of historical sexual violence, okay? And somebody now who is embarked, it's not, the accusation of rape is not always right, okay? Of course, it's not, more often than not, it is right. But you have to also put the query factor that the accused is, how should I put it, innocent until proven guilty. So we have to strengthen our ability to mobilize the evidence to prove the guilty. But we must also hold out an index of suspicion in case there are other reasons why the accusation is made. Now, somebody now who is seeking to destroy the marketability of a major presidential candidate in the USA concerning an event that is reported to have happened more than 20 years ago. We don't know whether it happened or not. The matter has come up a few times in different contexts and in different shapes, but the shape in which it is coming now is actually much larger and with more dire implications than whatever happened. So it's also a bit of reverse, it also confers a bit of reverse power, which itself can become a temptation to deploy the accusation wrongly. I'm not saying that happens all the time. I'm not saying it happens often, but to have a balanced picture, all of the different potentials in the scenario need to be put in context.
Thank you so much, Dr. Olubile. One question came to my mind, and I'll quickly just ask CSP Badmos before I bring the last speaker. The question is, do you protect, well, you protect the victims, but what about the person that's been accused of rape? We always see it on social media, even before they've been convicted. Why are they not protected?
Well, if I may come in from your angle, the question you've just asked that had they been protected? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay. If you use what the condemnation you get on the page of newspaper or the social media, and then you now align that with police operations, you might be not too correct.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that at times you see the name of the alleged perpetrator even before they get to court. Why is that the case, though?
You
So
see
we're
the
not
name.
talking about condemnation here. Somebody's been accused. We don't know whether it's true or not. Why?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. This where when you're talking about protection, we're not going to totally protect. Like, of course, there are moments you want to protect because maybe someone has just committed rape within the market square and he was caught, and then he's being beaten. You see police come and take him to protective custody.
Right.
And then there and there, you want to see the survivor, the victim, like they call it in the open parlance. So when they come and then they are able to give evidence that adduce to the fact that that person might have committed it, then you start treating the person who is already in your protective custody like an offender. And that is the fact that you know that the issue of rape is not a bailable offense. It is a felonious offense under the law of Nigeria. So you're not going to like rub shoulder or rub, even though within your mind as an investigator, you can also have the benefit of doubt. But as soon as investigation commences and fact is pointing to it that he must have committed it, then don't forget police, they are investigators. That's why we call everyone accused with us as suspects. They are deemed to be suspects. and then they should be treated as suspects. You cannot actually say, oh, they have committed it. As an investigator, your duty is to adduce the fact that point towards committance of an offense. It is only the law court that can actually say, okay, he has been accused and then he has been found guilty. And until someone is found guilty, it is presumed, you understand, that he is innocent. And then when everything points towards the fact that, I'm just saying this so that we don't get in line of duty. Of course, I hate the issue of rape. I don't tolerate the issue of defilement, anything sexual violence, but we still we keep our minds open. Let me use the word. We keep our minds open as an investigator. You are not going to say outrightly, oh, you have committed, oh, you have caught his head, or you understand. You keep, but I would tell you, when as an investigator, when you start seeing the facts pointing towards that, oh, this offense has been committed, then you start wondering, and your mind will be broadened. I mean, and will be tightened to be like, oh, I'm not going to let him escape because I have the reason to believe that he has done it. You understand? So I'm not going to pronounce judgment as an investigator, and what is expected of me and what we make posterity judge me right is when I don't compromise.
Right.
So while leaving the thing open, why opening my mind, why not actually attacking? You know, there are ways you use mind to attack people and it comes up in your actions.
Yeah.
So why not outrightly condemning or attacking the suspect? I'm also of the opinion that, okay, I should do what is expected of me.
Right.
So without letting down what is expected of me, I'm not going to compromise, and I will make sure that it's being done properly.
It's good to hear that, because which means that even if you find yourself in an awkward situation whereby you could be, awkward situation in the sense that if you're dealing with a case which involves a high profile individual, you wouldn't feel intimidated. You will ensure that you follow through until a
Yeah,
conviction.
I was on a live program yesterday, and this particular question sprang up.
Right.
And I said, well, we should all go back to the laws of the land.
Right.
There is no way that the law of the land said, this is for the low class, the lower class, or this is for the middle class, or you deal with the high class when it comes to this. And, thankfully, right now, the social media, whether we like it or not, has done a lot in helping and making sure that no case or cases are not being swept under carpet.
Right.
And that's why, when Mama was talking, Mama Taiwo, I can feel her, but, there are so many things I've seen that went wrong there. When you started saying, talking about me, I want to say we have 11 family support units in Lagos. 3 started before I became the police PRO. But I wrote a memo to the commissioner of police that we should bring up first started, we should bring up another 7 to make 11. Do you know why? With all sense of due respect to all my colleagues, it's not every one of us that understand how to handle this issue. And then that was why we needed to, raise more men. You understand? When I mean men now, I mean police personnel. Raise more men that understands when you come with issue of rape. I was smiling within me when Mama said the first time they entered, they were like, "Why are you living alone in this big place?" We've had people tell us that when you go to police station, they tell you, "Why did you wear that skirt? Why did you go to his house where you don't want to have any?" So it breaks my heart to see that. And I was able to put up a memo to the CP that let's have divisions spreaded all over Lagos.
Right.
And that was what we did. So if you have issue of gender based violence or issue of, domestic and sexual violence, the division to go. They are properly trained. And I could imagine when Mama had that in 2006, thereabout, I know that those things were not in place. And I can figure out it may happen. But right now, the narrative has changed. It can never happen again, especially in Lagos that I know of. and perhaps maybe Ekiti is springing up. And that's why I personally took it upon myself to reach out to all the first ladies and say, let's domesticate this and let's see that the process of implementation, especially putting together this structure, is put in place so that we won't have such complaint like Mama had anymore.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you for the clarification. And it's good to hear that the narrative is beginning to change. That's very important for people to know as well. Let me quickly move on to the last person. She's the founder and executive director of Women's Rights and Health Project, and the project also called Ireti Resource Center in Lagos, Nigeria. She's been involved in various community engagements that have produced a wide range of impact, including economic empowerment for gender-based violence survivors, occupational health and hygiene, child abuse, to mention a few. She's attended several international conferences such as Human Rights Defenders Advocacy Program in Geneva, also violence against women from the Institute of Kampala in Uganda. She's the recipient of the several awards from Nigeria, such as the Heroes Award 2015 for contributions to community development. She's a member of several organizations, such as the Working Group of 8 on Gender-Based Violence Nigeria. She's also a member of the steering committee called National Sex Offenders Register. I'm still going to ask you a question on that. A founding member of Domestic and Sexual Violence Response Team for Lagos State. Welcome, Bose Memosi.
Yeah, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Yeah, thank you so much. Good to be here.
Right.
CS Bidalapo, long time.
So I have some questions to ask you.
Yes, please.
Thank you for the good work you're doing, in the community. You're a member of this. I mean, everybody that I have invited over to speak on probably domestic violence or one thing or the other, they seem to belong to this team called DSVRT, the Domestic and Sexual Violence Response Team. So, and then you're also involved in so many NGOs. There's so many of them in Nigeria focused on rape cases, and you are the CEO of one. What does your NGO do to eradicate this scourge of rape? Or what are you trying to do?
I can't hear you.
What are you trying to do to eradicate this scourge of rape? All these rape incidents going all over the place.
Okay, thank you very much. I think a lot have been said when it comes to issues about rape.
Yeah.
Our legal groups have mentioned, and the security agents here have also mentioned what is going on. But I want to say that first, on Monday, November 25th, 2019, there was an online registered launch in Nigeria, put in place by the federal government, especially managed by the NAPTIC. Then that's just to say. So as an NGO, I want to say that the civil society are playing a very critical role in making sure that the issues of rape is addressed in Nigeria. One of them, they're playing a lot of role in advocacy, awareness raising. They're also playing a lot of role in making sure that there's accountability in the process, that due process is followed. Because one of the things that was mentioned by Professor Olugbinle, he made mention about the cause of rape is usually about power and control. And until you understand that, the woman gender, which is much more common in Nigeria, the rape that are affecting women is more common with the women, is about power and control. And until you understand that, you even when you get to the police, that is why the issue about what were you wearing will come in. That is why the issue, Mama Lasset was asked, why would she be living alone? If a man was living alone, would anybody have asked her such questions? So these are issues. And then beyond that too, I want to say that CSO, NGOs, for example, the First Sexual Referral Center in Nigeria, and maybe second in West Africa, Mirabel Center, was established by Partnership for Justice, which is an NGO that is working in partnership with Lagos State to make sure that due forensic results get, and that has helped. I can't remember now how much of cases they have been able to handle. And beyond that, they also follow up with psychosocial support, which is lacking in terms of when a person gets to the police. Yes, you have been raped and all that. What next? So in my own situation, I have a Ireti Resource Center, which is a burnout to after I have worked for several years, because I realized that we did a research and realized that majority of women don't even know, one, they have rights. They don't believe that where to report if they are raped. They didn't even understand that rape is something criminal. They just know that, okay, there's that euphoria that, oh, I went to his house and he raped me, and the man says, sorry, I won't do it again. And so you work on. So a lot of advocacy and awareness have been created by CSO. And probably, I want to say that between 2015 and 2019, we were able to simplify the Lagos State domestic violence law and engage the community people in more than 15 local government LCDAs in Lagos State. So I think that what we are doing is to create a platform for people to amplify people's voices. Because the reason why you have people talking now, yes, the social media is playing a great role, but if people don't have how would I put it, they don't have the confidence to come out and speak, and they don't have a place to go, after that, then we are just, rubbing the back and all that. You ask a very critical question to Mrs. Lycett, to ask her, why has she not taken it up beyond that? Yeah. Yes, even now she can still drag for her case, because even if we have been seeing in international community where after 35 years, after 40 years, people come up to say, well, I was raped by so person. And so when you dig in, you still have to find those people guilty in one way or the other. So what we are doing is that we are complementing Lagos State's activities to make sure that there's due process is maintained, to make sure that there's accountability. We are creating awareness because we believe in prevention. We believe so much in prevention, because we don't have to wait. How many people are we going to put in the police cell or sent to jail for what we can prevent? So what we are doing is to make sure that we raise the voices of community people to be able to speak out, because there is pandemic and endemic silence. I mean, people not be able to speak out against violence. And then beyond that, after the rape, what next? People need to heal. So there's need for people to heal specifically in terms of going forward in their case. And I think that's what we do. Recently, people are suggesting that there should be sexual assault referral centers in all government institutions. Accessibility to these services is not available. So we need to make sure that there are. Then when you are talking about police, how many police people are trained? Yes, there are 11 family support units. But when you train these police, they are very mobile. They are moved to Nasarawa. They are trained again to go and stand as traffic, wardens and all that. So there is a lot of re-engineering that needs to be done. And I think that with what has happened recently over these few weeks, with the pandemic that we are seeing within, what is happening in Nigeria, and especially in some of these communities, I think that the government needs to wake up to their responsibility.
I couldn't just agree with you more on those. I mean, you've offered series of solutions there, Ram. We create this awareness, we talk about the challenges, and then we talk about the issues, and we prefer solutions as well. Hopefully somebody somewhere is listening to this and will take it up to the next level. And another question I really want to ask you here is that do you work in conjunction with the DPP at all, or with the police,
Yes,
to ensure the conviction of these perpetrators?
Yeah. Okay. Now I want to say that as a member of the DSVROT, the DSVROT is a coordinated, multi-stakeholders team.
Right.
So that means you have the NGOs, you have the DPP, you have the public, you have the OPD, Office of the Public Defenders, you have the police, you have the Ministry of Justice working as a team to respond to whatever case it is. So we are working, working together. And then we're also working with schools, parent teachers associations, going to schools to create awareness about what. So I think what we need to do more and more and more is to make sure that the reporting pathways are not to the people. Because if they know from point A, if I'm raped, what I should do, and then for point B, what I should do, I will tell you, some weeks ago, I established that Ireti Resource Center in Alimosho local government area, the largest local government area in a state. That is where you also have the high reporting. But we have a lot of challenges. And what are the challenges? How do you respond to some of these cases? The police are willing, but how well are they financed to respond to cases? Police are not well financed to respond to cases. So they don't have, their cars are not moving. Even if they have cars, probably there are no fuel. And you don't expect them to use their resources to do that. And so everything is back to us as NGOs who are complementing what the government is doing to run some of these programs. And sometimes we source for funds and we don't get funds. Like now I have almost about 6 cases that I'm going to run in the next 2 weeks. Making sure that they go to court, making sure that, the police are able to be picked and things like that. So there are a lot of challenges that are there. So we work with all these groups. And I must say that Lagos is leading in terms of response. And if we have to go further, I think that there is need to also keep retraining the police and everyone that is responding to issues about sexual abuse and rape.
Yeah, fantastic. Honestly, you're so passionate about it, and I can see things changing, to be honest with you. You've talked about training to bring in the stakeholders as well, to make sure people know what their rights are. And of course, to also offer the victims or the survivors the counseling which they require. Yes, Mrs. Lysette could be a very strong woman, but you can get somebody else who is not as strong as she is. And then we mustn't forget that men are also raped. We shouldn't forget that. So, and some of the solutions, you've talked about them, also challenge, going by what Dr. Lubile said, to challenge contributing social cultural factors. Also to ensure stringent laws and policies so that they serve as deterrent,
I just wanted to I also add that one of our projects, for example, is men-to-men engagement. Engaging men to understand. If you are a landlord and you have a batterer, because it's just little. If you have a batterer or a rapist in your house, then you are also an accomplice. And then we have also tried to make sure that everybody is a mandatory reporter. You are not supposed to be quiet. You are supposed to report. So if you are a chief and you are a king, or you are a baile, or you are a pastor in the church or whatever, you are supposed to be a mandatory reporter.
Exactly. With the need to break the culture of silence. And
of course.
To train all the support agencies, the counselors. And then just the other day when we were sharing that some of these people set up the NGOs, but they are not fully equipped in terms of training, maybe to give, in terms of giving the appropriate counseling to the victims. And then, I don't know, this is another suggestion that to regulate the NGOs involved in sexual violence cases. I think it's very important to educate them, and then to involve all these local community leaders, faith leaders, for them to be preaching about these things in mosques and churches. And then, of course, to train sexual violence champions. The other time, Jolakwa Badmos was saying that she goes to school to give talks. So also maybe to, train some males as well, just like we had some male champions when we dealt with the FGM our topic some weeks ago. And then I think it's very important, even if we have the register, to monitor and evaluate the register. Is it effective? Monitor and evaluate programs implemented, including services, whatever services that's attached to sexual violence. And I think it's just to have mutual respect for one another, and of course to train our children, because we talk about RAM all the time, that our mindset is actually born out of of our cultural beliefs, traditional values, and ignorance. It plays a role as well, so we need to empower our girls. We really need to do that. So I don't know whether I can just quickly take a couple of questions, because I know for a fact that we sort of like overrun by nearly 20 minutes to take some questions, because I think most of the questions probably came from me, and that's because I was also looking into the chat box to see whether anybody has any questions. So if you want to ask any of the panelist questions, or if you want to ask Mrs. Lysa a question, or even a comment, just to make it brief so that we round up the discussion. Okay, I can see two participants raising up their hands. Who was this? Yes, Otumba there. What's your question, please?
Thank you very much, Ms. Moderator.
Yeah.
My contribution from all look of things, from all what I've had here today, substantially, it looks like we having challenges in the area of awareness, which I believe we can deal with. We're also having problem of the certain, part of the country as well, because I want to concentrate in Nigeria, because even in a civilized country where you and I live, or there's still some element of problems in dealing with rape cases. So we had that from presentations, and we're also having challenges why some of these laws that we've been talking about have not been working. Also, another serious area I take note of is the most elegant part of dealing with the issue of rape, where once they are caught and convicted, how do we monitor? How do we prevent that doesn't happen again? All this all together now brings me to a suggestion, a kind of a submission. And I think a platform like this will serve better to concentrate more. As you can see, all the legal aspect, all the legal arrangements have been written. We all know about it. I'm also in the legal business. But what is key, what is the most important here is how do we help? Because at the end of the day, 95%, as far as I'm concerned, issue of rape, anybody sleeping on the top of a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old must be having some mental issue. But again, there are people say there's a prevention better than cure. So if we concentrate and use this platform, a little bit of substance of area of law, then the substantial part of our engagement is how do we deal? How do we create awareness and so on and so forth? This is based on all what I had here tonight. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay. Thank you so much for that contribution. Very, very appreciated. I think I have one more person that's raised up their hand there. It's Femi Awodele. Femi Awodele. And I'll take the last one from Billy Kisu. Femi Awodele.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you very much. First of all, I want to say thank you to all the speakers for this excellent exposition of the topic of rape. But I have a comment and then a question as well. My comment is that I really want to say kudos to Mrs. Lyset. It takes a lot of courage to admit in public that you went through this kind of ordeal. It is the most horrendous ordeal that anybody could go through. So I really commend you for that. And I think somebody had mentioned one of the things that I actually wanted to say, and that was that as far as I know, there is no statute of limitations when it comes to rape. I don't know which state yours occurred in. I think that, the pursuit of prosecution is something that you shouldn't just ignore just because it happened several years ago. Because the real deterrent to rape is successful prosecutions,
Mm.
convictions, and stiff sentences.
Yeah.
That is the real deterrent. And I also want to say thank you to, I think it's the police officer, Dolakbo Badmus, for being honest with us, because we know that there's normally a conspiracy of silence when it comes to police officers trying to protect each other.
Yeah.
But you were very frank about the challenges that you have in the police force.
Right.
And I have been to the police station in Nigeria several times. I'm a lawyer. And when you go there, you would understand why prosecutions, why cases are just not well investigated. So those are my comments, and I thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Femi. Can we have Billy Kisu? She will be the last person to probably ask the question or comment. Oh, okay. Tony is also there. Billy Kisu. I don't know where she is on the spot here.
Okay, can you hear me?
Right, we can.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm not going to burden you with
any problem why you've turned on your webcam?
no, I'm fine. I don't need to be on camera.
Oh well.
If that's okay.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah. So so just to applaud you for this wonderful initiative, especially for a very sensitive topic. And mine is by way of comment to say that we shouldn't forget that the rape victim must be looked at holistically. I know a lot of people in the room are lawyers, and of course, there are a couple of medical personnel. The rape victim, of course, has to be looked at physically, mentally, psychologically, medically, and that has been overflogged. Now, from the medical perspective, I'm more of a medical person, and to say that attending to the rape victim is timely. I recall in one of the discussions, Mrs. Dolakwa was mentioning something about 3 days. I mean, sometimes rape victims get to the hospitals quite late. Some interventions need to be instituted from like 24 hours from when this event occurs. I mean, you're talking about sexually transmitted infections, the risk of HIV, knowing that you want to give the patients, post-exposure prophylaxis, because sometimes the assailant may not be present for you to even carry out an HIV test. So I want us to just keep our eyes on that aspect, that the rape victim must be looked at from the medical angle. And I'm hoping that with this platform, that maybe even the rape kits can be made available in hospitals, in maybe tertiary institutions. You may have that, where yes, even if the rape victim comes, without any evidence, because sometimes you may not have those evidences. But if you have a rape kit, you can do a lot more. You can take some bodily fluid samples and you can send them, and it can also hasten the investigation. So this is just my humble comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Billy Kisu. Tony, what's your comment? Just a quick one, please.
Okay. There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
I think, like I think one of the speakers mentioned, prevention is better than cure. And I think it's very important that we need to start to talk to children.
Yeah.
There's no young child anymore. And I think they need to be aware, especially women or young girls, that they should be confident. So we need to build their self-esteem. We need to let them know who they are. And we also need to let them know that they can communicate. And I've always said, communication between children and parents is very important. If you cannot speak to your parents, speak to a good friend or a family member, because sometimes we hold back because we're children and our parents will never believe us. So it's very, very important. Teach your child to be independent, to be strong, and to be able to speak out. So that's my little contribution.
Thank you very much, Tony. Tony is actually a consultant psychiatrist based in the United Kingdom. Thank you so much for that. Somebody asked this question here. Let me just quickly take that. How do you signpost people to a place of refuge by phone? Do you want to take that, Bosse Rose? How do you signpost people to a place of refuge, or would that be Dolakbo? Is Bosse still there? Can she take it, or Dolakbo? How do you signpost people to a place of refuge by phone, or isn't there any?
Can I take that?
Yes.
Oh, but shortly before I come in with that, I'm so sorry. I've been on the move. I had to stay. It's getting dark here, but I know a lot of people have seen my face. I want to say, number one thing, I could remember when I was having an interview with Miss Hayemi, who is now the coordinator of the First Ladies Against Gender-Based Violence. I could remember asking her that, do you think culture or tradition has played a great role in making our young men or even elderly men perpetrate this? And I can remember what, I'm sorry now if I don't pronounce the name very well. I think Chief Jemi Luz Ogujemi, whatever, I can't remember right now, said that most times these things are being controlled by ego. You understand? They don't want nobody to say no to them.
Right.
Do you understand? And then the boys feel like whatever I want, I should get it. And then they go all along to show their power, to show, you understand, that they can actually control a woman, and then they perpetrate all of this. We want, it's easy for us to, lay blame on government. It's easy for us to lay blame on anyone we feel we should lay blame on. But I want to say that individually, we also have to come together to work, because when you have two children, one is a boy and one is a girl, you hear parents telling the boy, the girl that, oh, excuse me, let your brother talk first. Don't you know he's a man? Don't you know he's a man? I mean, psychologically, you are walking into them to make them have that superiority complex.
Yes.
And then when they go out and they see their peer, their schoolmates, and the schoolmate said, I'm not interested, then they would look at the girl like, who are you? I mean, my mother has told me I'm a man, my father has told me I'm a man, and then I should have whatever I feel like having. So subconsciously, we also, how are we helping our children to get out of this? The boy, the girl, they are all the same. Whether you are a boy, whether you are a girl. So I think culture, from that our angle of culture, and I could remember the first lady also saying, what will make a man, when you give birth to a baby boy, you kill a ram. But when it's a baby girl, you kill a chicken. I'm not a feminist, I'm not trying to be one, but I think these are the underlying factors that is letting our young men, our younger boys, think that they can rape and go scot-free. So we should raise children that should know and understand that as a boy, I have an article I'm working on now, and the topic I'm giving it is, oh boy, the instrument under you is not of destruction. So we should let our children know from early age that their instrument is not for destruction. And then we will all be good for it. I can't figure out the question you asked again. I'm sorry.
That's fine. So you've started off with giving us a lasting statement before we leave. I'd just like to quickly ask somebody who has actually joined us as well, is appeared on two previous discussion program with us. That is Area Commander Monday Agbonika. Any lasting statement before we leave? He's also part of the the Domestic Sexual and Violence Response Team. ACP Agbonika. Any lasting statement before we all leave? I'll be taking it around the panelists as well.
Oh, thank you very much, Fumi, for giving me this opportunity. I think with the caliber of speakers that you have assembled, most of the areas of concern have been tackled. I just want to chip in one word with respect to police and police actions. I want to talk about police being a little bit proactive, and especially the issue of record.
Yes.
Maybe if we have record, very good record of incidents of rape, and we understand, we try to study the pattern of criminality.
Yes.
It might help us in planning better, because in that respect, we'll be able to have something like hotspots, whereby we can do an appropriate plan that is proactive, and we'll be able to put, or rather commit our resources, our scarce resources, in areas that will make a good impact in trying to prevent, instead of just waiting until these incidents occur and we start running and up and down.
Yes. Okay. So
Thank
can
you.
I have a lasting statement from you, Jide Lanlane? Just one statement. Just a statement, a single sentence.
I don't think you can ask me to say a single sentence, but I understand what you mean.
Yes.
I think insofar as the law is concerned, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and so they have to do their part. I think the law needs to investigate these cases, bring them to justice.
Right.
Sentencing must be tough, and to make sure that we protect the women. Now, in this country, as you know, in the United Kingdom, the alleged victims get anonymity. That's also part of it, to protect them against attack, either from the media or from attack from the so-called assailants. So there's a lot more that can be done for victims in Nigeria. And I believe the police officers need to be more proactive in the way they investigate these cases, show sympathy towards the victims first, and then let's make sure that the law is sentencing people properly and bringing them to justice. And the sentences in the UK are deliberately tough. There's a reason for it. It's to deter people from carrying out these heinous crimes.
Thank you.
Rape is, in my view, second only to murder, because murder, the victim is not there. In rape cases, the victim is there, live. And you've got to make sure that these kind of offenses are deterred by very tough sentences for those who are convicted at the end of it. So thank you.
Bola, can I take a statement from you?
Yes, thank you very much. Also, I think I'll be very quick, just to say that everyone has a role to play. I think many of the speakers have said that. When you look at the concept of DSVRT, which is what we replicated here in Ogun State recently, is to bring a multi-stakeholder team to respond and to put them on the spot to develop practices, good practices that can help to improve on the victim experiences in this area. And one of the things I usually say is that when we have such a big, massive problem, a pandemic of this nature, the improvements are not going to be felt immediately. We always say that perception lags behind reality. I think we're making small progress in certain small parts of the country. It hasn't become widespread yet. People can't feel them yet. One of the things that I was also going to add, because we've been talking a lot about the experiences of women and girls, and very little about boys, because there was a study that was actually carried out by DSVRT recently. They interviewed the awaiting trial detainees and convicts in all the Lagos state prisons, and they found that about 81% of them were abused as children. And these are mostly men, they're boys that were abused, men that were abused as boys. And one of the things that this should tell us is that, first of all, boys are also victims. And secondly, that maybe if we target and specifically focus on preventing those abuses also to them, that it might prevent this from happening in future. So I thank you very much for having me on the program.
Thank you so much, Jide and Bola. No wonder you are lawyers. Dr. Lubile, just a last statement, please. A very quick one.
While it is true that, am I muted?
Yes.
While it is true that a certain number of people who commit rape have anger or violence issues, the general pattern and the correct practice is to try to prosecute and to try the case on its merit, irrespective of whatever may be extenuation. People generally are responsible for their actions. The second plank of my final word is that the plethora of rape cases we are seeing is just what has been there unrecognized, mostly what has been there unrecognized in the past. So it's getting more attention, which is a good thing. I need to subsume that within the context of a values challenge which we have in Nigeria. We have a general challenge with regards to values. Our values are all shot to pieces. That's why people don't stop at traffic lights. And even when people are doing the correct thing. Somebody is coming behind you and abusing you for doing the correct thing. We need to, we need a massive advocacy campaign from early childhood to reprogram ourselves and reprogram the minds of our youth about that doing good is good and doing bad is bad. It's not, the issue is not whether you are caught or not. The issue is that it is good to be good and it is bad to be bad. I think it's as basic as that, but it's all encompassing because so if you isolate rape, we are doing an artificial thing. It is, and we have an across the board challenge in values. That is, generally people will we do anything that they can get away with. Even the billionaires will break the traffic lights when there's no policeman. Even accomplished people should know better. We will take what is not theirs when they are certain they cannot be caught. It's basically dignity. But most importantly of all, we need to let people know about values, retrain them because they've been badly trained. They've seen worthless people becoming very good people. They've seen that the good does not triumph in the end. They've seen that the bad people are not brought to heel in the end. That's the story of Nigeria. So to reprogram that, you have to reteach them after, okay, what you've seen, what you've grown up learning are aberrations. The truth is that it is good to tell the truth, even when there's nobody breathing down your neck. It is good to be respectful to other people, to be respectful to your female colleague, even when there's no pressure to be so, even when other boys are breathing down your neck and telling you you're a stupid fellow, okay? So that is as
Dr. Olubili, thank you for that. Quickly, Bosse and Rose, can you just give us a final statement, please?
Yeah, thank you so much. I want to say that that the people who are going out to work on issues about responding to gender-based violence or rape should be well trained to handle some of these cases, because if they are not properly trained, they don't know what to do, they don't have a practice direction, you will just discover that it's like we are re-traumatizing those who have come out for the survivors and all that. But I also want to say that we have spoken a lot. There is need to put resources where our mouth is. So there is need for funding for people to be able to carry out some of all this, because majority of the people who comes to us are actually poor people, and they don't have money, they don't have accessibility and all that. So I think that's where, and then community engagement is key.
Yes.
You must engage the community continuously to take responsibility, to be responsive to issues like that. Government can't do it alone, the police cannot do it alone. Community policing is what we are talking about. So engaging the community people and civil society at the community level, it's vital if we must win the war of any form of violence against persons.
Thank you very much. On a final note, Mrs. Lysette, what's the message you want to pass on to everybody listening to this and for all of us watching you? Because this is something so sensitive. You came out boldly to talk about it. What's the message you want to pass out?
Be strong, but bottom line is everybody is come back to that. Even though we've discussed the structures and everything, that we are losing our culture. The family system is broken down. You don't have to grow up before you know that you shouldn't beat red stoplights. It is something you grow up with, and we are losing that. We're letting our children raise themselves. So as I said, bottom line, we've got to go back to basics. People should find time to raise their children and not throw them out to schools to raise them for them. And put the values that Dr. Olubili was talking about. We have lost our values. And if you lose your values, why are we surprised about the pandemic of rape or indiscipline or whatever? Everything is gone to pot. So if the women, when you're talking about doing something about women, can we raise our women to raise their own children properly? Can we go back to basics? Because if you don't give good home training to your children, then they won't know about dignity of another human being. It will be me, 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 me.
Yes.
And that's what this society is about. Can we think about one another? Can we love your neighbor as you love yourself? And the women who are victims or survivors, you are not victims, actually, you're survivors. Don't make a victim of yourself. Be strong. You know, the sun will always shine tomorrow. So thank you very much for making me part of this discussion.
Fantastic. Thank you to everybody for coming. I very much appreciate you all because you could have been doing something else. And, most especially Mrs. Lysett for coming to share this with us with so much grace. I thank you all. Jide, Bolahon, Dolapo, Dr. Olubile, and of course, Bose Irose. I thank everybody for being here.